Welcome to D.en.a, also known as Yap City, population me. And this is Should You Play Yellow Vaccine? Or as my friends know it, Pain and Suffering. So in this Should You Play series, I want to answer a few questions about a lot of out of the meta decks. These questions are going to look something like, is it fun? Is it difficult? Is it accessible? Is the deck meta relevant? What are the strengths and weaknesses of this deck? And lastly, I want to show an important engine to most of the decks. Cards that are absolutely essential, but that you can add another set of cards around it that will just work towards you being able to make a deck yourself, more so than a clear cut and paste deck profile. Now this is, to me, a really important video to make, not only for the fact that I'm just obsessing over Yellow Vaccine, but also as a way for casuals and maybe newer players to see the game as not just what is absolutely top of the meta, for example, like Numemon currently and Red Hybrid, but other decks that are, still pretty fun and you can take to your locals and still have a very good chance at winning. And other decks that just won't, and I don't want you to waste your time even bothering looking at. Those might be a part of this as well. So without further ado, should you play Yellow Vaccine? So first up, let's talk about the engine. I think it's probably one of the most important parts of this deck. Start with Patamon. Patamon makes this deck phenomenal. It's incredible that you can Digivolve for free. With some of the other cards in this set, you're able to stock your security in a way that you want it to. Just amazing card, gains memory, really just infinite value. And TK goes phenomenally with Patamon. So your best turn one is always going to be Patamon and Raising, TK, take a card, put what you want in security, and then gain a memory, put them to 2. And the next turn you're gaining 2 memory off of whatever they set you to. 1, you're back to 3. 2, you're back to 4. You're up to 4. It's just great value. Digimon is a great card to just get rid of viruses. Just absolutely, completely getting rid of an entire Fenriluga stack is hilarious. But it's also great that you can just minus 5k on a small body, put it into security, immediately go into another egg in Raising, and then you're just moving again. You just keep moving faster. Gatomon is so much better than I thought it was. You're gaining a memory with the Pata when it trashes out of security, especially with this build that I've done with Yellow Vaccine. It just plops out and it's just an ace waiting to happen to your opponent that also has barrier, so it's really difficult for them to out, and it's creating a swarm deck. This card is sick. I love the new Gatomon. I'm so surprised at how much it does for the deck. It's so simple, but it does so much. Magna Ace is a really good card that can just put you up to 6 security, and then you are able to just, boom, explode another 6k DP on your opponent. A great one, but overshadowed by Anduamon Ace. This card is probably one of the most phenomenal adds to the deck. Your Blasted evolving onto your Gatomon that just got taken out, played it out from security. Your opponent doesn't expect it. You minus 6k on them, trash a security, go down to 3, you're able to recover 1, and then your opponent's hitting minus 6k into security. Their big body that's usually 12 or 13k is now 7-ish, 7, 8. It's crazy to just boom, get out of here. Because they will hit something that will, explode them. And then now you have a body that every single turn is able to is able to recover 1 if you stay on it. So, amazing. And then last but not least, getting through it all really very quickly, is Venusmon. Venus is toxic in a way, solely for the fact that you go from this deck that is destroying Digimon and really pushing your opponent to the limit, and then suddenly you hit them with a Digimon that's Sec -1 blanket and also says you can't do anything. You are not allowed to do anything that your deck wants to for a turn, and you just push them. You push them a little further, and then if they raise to just deal with the problem because they're already a turn behind, they are actively decimating themselves by walking into aces, and if they don't raise, they're a turn further behind, and it's just awesome. Venus is crazy, a little bit toxic. Let's get into the next point. This is unfortunately a very inaccessible deck, I would say. It has multiple super rares. There's a secret as well. These all span from different sets. You're going to be chasing a lot of super rare cards. The good news is most of these are actually pretty cheap, to be honest. At their base rarity of just a regular super rare, Angelmon and Patamon are both around $10 each for AUD. So it's probably even a little bit cheaper for Americans. And that's about the bulk of the cost. Venusmon is a little bit more expensive, as she is a pretty darn good boss monster, and unfortunately, again, she's from BT10, whereas most of these are from around BT14, so again, a little bit more difficult to get your hands on again. So already a notch for the deck, but that's what I want to talk about. Yes, this deck is so fun. Being able to Digivolve for free into a level 4, Digivolve for free into a level 5 or 6, gaining memory while you're doing that is so cool in and of itself. But better than that is putting a newly released card called Revelation of Light into your security, playing out a level 4, making a little bit of a swarm, and just saying to your opponent, hit this. It's a blanket ruin mode that will just stick for until the end of my turn. So if your opponent hits it in security, when their turn is over, it's not gone. I still have that blanket 5k for a whole nother turn to continue reducing their DP. And also to contend with that, this is peak yellow. Being able to, again, play with your security, have full knowledge of what's going on, having options that can really fuck with your opponent, and have Digimon that play in your opponent's turn to further reduce their DP and kill them without them understanding why they're about to die, or without them realizing what's about to come. Because we are playing in a new format where aces are starting to become much better and people aren't really still accustomed to them yet. So a lot of people just forget that aces exist, and then suddenly I'm running 4 Angelmons in my deck, and I'm gonna have the ace every single time on Gatto. So if you're not remembering that it exists, you are actively walking into 11, reducing your DP by 11k, and there's not much that survives that if you hadn't prepared beforehand. And if you have and you're just hitting security anyway, you're probably just gonna die to security. So it's really cool. It's so much fun. And what's even more fun about it is there's so many ways for you to tech this. You don't have to play the Gatomon in your deck. You don't have to play Venus in your deck. You can change it, and you can add Bulkmon. You can add Seraphimon. You can make this aggro and turn around and say, no, I don't feel like sitting and waiting for you to do your thing. I'm gonna do my shit right now, and I'm going to kill you. And then when they come back and they try to fight back, that's when you reduce their DP again. You just start hitting them back again. Peak yellow. This is awesome. This is so much fun. I don't know how else to explain it. I would say it's a close tier 2. It's just outside of the meta. It does kind of poorly against some of the really absolute standout decks, like for example Leviamon, Numemon, and Red Hybrid. So those are the 3 at the top currently in the BT15 meta. Against Numemon, it's pretty good, but only if you're able to keep up in tempo with them, put a Revelation of Light into your security, keep some neg 5, then a lot of their little bodies that they get played out again are gonna explode underneath. But if they get to a little bit fast, a little bit too quickly, and you're unable to keep up with them, you are absolutely going to get out-tempoed. There is no question that this deck just won't function as fast as something like Numemon can do. Leviamon, I haven't played it yet, but I can only imagine that having my tamers popped, my opponent playing out my Digimon and then killing them and then doing 3 checks can be pretty devastating. You can, again, with Revelation of Light, which is just an absolute banger of a card, you can, neg them by 5k, it still puts them at 8k. Leviamon is huge. It's a 13k Digimon that does 2 checks already. That's so crazy. Red Hybrid is kind of the same thing. It can really outpace you, But once you get your opponent's board absolutely under control, you can really start to walk them down. But it's very difficult because at any point they can walk out, do 3 checks, and then blitz Omni for game. Because this is a control deck. This is much slower than something like Red Hybrid is. And the thing with Digimon is sometimes, unfortunately, aggro decks live to be the best. And this is probably one of the best control decks we've had in a long time, but it's not quite control-y enough like security control. It still plays with Digimon, it still plays a lot more fairly. So obviously, immediately after talking about is it meta relevant, let's talk about what are the strengths and weaknesses of the deck. Man, when you're ahead, it is unbreakable. You're putting Revelation into your security, giving them -5 blanket like a ruin mode. You're able to make these big stacks. Venus keeps your opponents out of the game, like we talked about. You're gaining 4 to 5 memory a turn because of TK, because of Pada, because of Gatomon. These cards really add a lot. You've got other cards that give you a lot of ability to, for example, just recover more and more. You're pushing your opponent further out of the game. But on the other side of that is the weakness. Pada, if your opponent can do 2 checks immediately out of the gates and you haven't TK'd turn 1, you only have 3 targets that you're able to Digivolve into. And that can be a huge difference in whether or not you actually are able to Digivolve for free and then further stack your security. Tempo is the name of this deck. And if it's hit immediately and very quickly, it can be very hard to recover as quickly. But when you do start to recover slowly and you start building those bricks, controlling your opponent, stemming that early extreme tempo, you can pick up steam very, very quickly on the back end. I'm still learning where to do little checks here and there because I'm not a control player, and I'm still able to do some amazing control plays against my opponents. I tend to play aggro. I genuinely enjoy aggro decks, but this has really shown me a very cool way to play Digimon. It's different to how I usually play it, but learning where to do those little checks is a really important part of the deck, because you can end up spending a lot of time just trying to control and destroy as many of your opponent's Digimon, and then swinging 5 checks at the end of the game when you have 5 bodies out on the field. That's how I've tended to play it, but with learning the deck it's gonna get a lot easier finding those littler checks and feeling like I'm able to do that. So it has some pretty stark weaknesses. Obviously, another one of the biggest weaknesses is both of the levels 5s that I'm running in this deck are just aces, and if your opponent kills them, that's an extra 3 memory that they're able to have for free, which is a very easy possibility to come across. But man, I'm happy to give my opponent 3 memory a lot of the time for them to extend a little if I can push back immediately straight after and punish them for overextending. That's totally fine. You can have that 3 memory if I can play in your turn. So another thing I want to answer here is it difficult for a newer player, for a casual? I think really frankly speaking, the answer here is yes. The deck has a lot of choices that need to be made, and unfortunately, you need to be able to play very quickly, because not only are you playing a deck that is trying its hardest to reduce your opponent's DP by, for example, 12k, by 13k, you're also doing your absolute hardest to control tempo. You're doing things like making sure that when your Pada comes out and digivolves into a level 4, is it going to, what are you putting back in? And is that going to affect your next 2 turns? I've had games where I've put level 4s in straight after I've digivolved over my Patamon, thinking that the next Patamon was going to be able to go into that Digimon again, and then realize that, damn, I'm not going to have access to that Digimon, or worse yet, the Digimon that I put into security isn't going to help me in the slightest off of Patamon. For example, Bulkmon, late in the game, if I put it in to do 2 checks and then realize my opponent has pushed out a massive body and I need a Rapidmon to reduce that one's DP by just a little bit more than what my level 5s can do, and I've already chosen a Bulkmon ahead of time, you fucked yourself. those are really little pain points that are something that you can learn and progressively get better with at the deck. So I think the deck has a really medium floor to high ceiling in terms of its difficulty, because the better you get at the deck, the more control you're going to be able to have over the games. But on that note, you're not only playing with how you play the deck optimally, you are unfortunately a lot of the time teaching and showing your opponents what is going to happen, what happens if they hit Revelation of Light, what happens if you swing, reduce their DP, which Digimon are continuing into their turn as well as into mine. So what ends up happening is no fault of anybody else's, but they will end up thinking pretty hard on what they're about to do, and people will kind of see yellow in your deck and think, damn, I'm versus security control, I really need to think this one out. When a lot of the time, if they just aggro you down, you're gonna have a really hard time. But they can just end up taking a long time. So this deck does go to time sometimes, because it is a control deck, and most of Digimon's decks are extremely aggro, and people who you play against aren't going to be prepared for that. And again, that's not to disparage anybody who I've played against, anybody who plays against you if you decide to play this deck, but it's just part of the deck. You are teaching your opponent how to play against it whilst you're playing it, because you would feel like an asshole if you put Revelation of Light into security and didn't tell them what the actual card did. It's public knowledge. You have to tell them what it did. And you would be an asshole if you just didn't, and you just said, hit this. And they said, what does it do? And you went, it's in security, it's not public knowledge anymore. Unfortunately, you haven't explained the card to begin with. So yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult deck to play, and for your opponents to play against, of course. And I think it's a half and half answer. Maybe we'll do a rating system down the track, but yes, I think you should play it because it's fun. It allows you to expand on fundamentals of, Digimon, the TCG, that maybe you wouldn't have learned by just playing aggro decks, by just playing very heavy combo decks. I think that it expands on your capabilities as a player and your decision making as a player. I really think that it is a great deck to be able to not start with, but to further your basics and fundamentals. But I also want to say, no, I don't think this is a deck you should play. Only for the fact that it's inaccessible. It's very difficult to get a lot of the cards. That being said, a lot of them can be teched out for things like Bancho Leo. That was recently put in one of the most recent sets. But a lot of the cards are, shiftable, changeable in the deck. But when I say no, I don't think this is a deck you should play. I think this is a deck that you should play once you've started to learn Digimon already and you feel like you've gotten the fundamentals. You don't want to go to locals and go to time because you don't already know your deck. Unfortunately, you don't want to be that asshole. I don't want you to be that asshole. But, if you just want to do that, fuck it. Go fucking go draw somebody else to time and then blame them afterwards. Of course, you tell them they were slow playing. We gaslight out here. So, yes and no, you should play the deck. It's fun. No, don't play the deck. It's difficult. Hopefully, if I do more of these, we'll kind of get a really good system for this going. But for now, it's a maybe. All right, so hopefully that wraps this up. I do want these to be a little bit shorter than some of my other videos. I've got an hour-long video, so I do want this to be a bit of a shorter one. I really want to be able to explain and give a lot of knowledge about a very specific deck, more so than just, here's a deck profile, here's why the cards are good, use these cards. I would really personally prefer, if I were a newer player, to have understood why the cards were in the deck to begin with, and I just like hearing about what a deck does more so than here are the cards in the deck. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope that maybe you got something out of this. I'd like to do more of these, so if you do like the video, I'm not going to tell you to like it, but just comment and just say, hey, I want this deck done. I'd love to see a new player's perspective on this deck or something like that. And hopefully I can really do my best to distill information down into a lot of fun decks for you because I play every deck under the sun. I was originally going to do Alphamon to start this one out, but I had too many thoughts and processes about Alphamon to kind of start out with, and I do really also think that Alphamon is kind of a bit of a difficult deck to start with as well. And then I got absolutely obsessed with this yellow vaccine list, so I just had to talk about it. And I thought, but why bother doing a deck profile? Why can't we do something a little more? So I hope you enjoy this video, and I'll see you next time.